Yo, what's going on guys? cebmofroz back here for another video. Anyways, this video is going to be part 2 of the new player progression guide I'm making. So you don't necessarily need to watch the first part to watch this, but you probably want to be to the third to last quest in your quest list, which is the one to defeat event bosses. But a quick rundown of the video is basically teaching you the basics of the quest line and how to get through most of it, how to find different biomes in the game, and where to start your early game grinding basically. So a quick breakdown as well of the early, mid, and late game I'll go ahead and go over real fast. Early game is basically getting tier 6 and tier 7 items and grinding center dungeons. Mid game is learning all the event dungeons besides shatters, getting to 52 tier points, starting to grind up to tier 8 to tier 10 items along with getting some white bags for your character. Then late game consists of 4 pieces of content which we'll be going over in another video. So anyways, let's get started with the mid game. This is where you're going to spend the majority of your time playing this game. So, first off, there's 3 different categories of the main game content. There's 40 tier point dungeons, there's 45 tier point dungeons, and there's 52 tier point dungeons. This guide will go over the easiest of each of the tier point dungeons, and there'll be a future guides on some of the harder ones. Anyways, let's start with the 40 tier point dungeons. There's Omni, Fungal, and Corsair for the 40 tier point dungeons. All 3 of these are very relatively easy, but Omni is by far the easiest. Next would probably be Fungal, then Corsair. But these 3 are all so easy that you could probably do most starting off, but Omni by far you can do is your very first event dungeon. It's basically everybody's first event dungeon. The majority of white bags and black bags, you can actually get a black bag in this dungeon, come from this dungeon. You will see so many drops announced from this dungeon. It's insane because so many people just start off doing this and can grind it quite a bit. Anyways, you know how we've been using the Adventures Obelisk to locate biomes? Well, you can also use this to locate bosses. So, for us to be able to do Omnis, we need to wait until there is a Lotto boss that spawns. Now, I will say the event boss for this is actually more tough than the boss itself. It's kind of crazy, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's hilarious. But it's nothing too crazy, to be honest. All you really need to do for this is to just avoid his snowball and to not get too close to him. Well, unless you're playing a melee, which I'm playing right now, so you really shouldn't start with melee classes. I'll tell you that right now, by the way. If you're playing a melee class and you feel like you're struggling, you should probably switch off to like a Necro to start or a Huntress. The extra range is going to be very big for you because the further away you are from an enemy, the less likely you are to get hit. So, anyways, just kind of avoid his snowball, and other than that, once the guy dies, he'll be dropping Omni. Now, at this point, you'll probably be noticing that I've been playing this game in third person quite a bit. This is the point in the guide where I'm going to explain a very crucial mechanic, and that's playing in third person. Now, I know this is going to be a hard mechanic for a lot of people to learn, especially those who played Minecraft only exclusively in first person. But taking the few hours to really get good at it is going to be very important, especially for some dungeons that are very hard later on. Some dungeons will literally tell you to go into third person because if you're not in third person, you're going to die. So for me personally, I mapped third person to the R key because it's very easy for me to move over and hit R quickly. Also, the biggest thing I see that people don't actually realize with third person is if you aim directly at the ground, like you'll see with me doing in this video, it actually makes your shots go straight. So don't worry about having to be at a weird angle and aiming your cursor up and trying to hit the enemy. No, you just look directly at the ground and shoot and your shots will go straight. Anyways, back to the dungeon. Basically, the clear for this dungeon doesn't even exist. There's 4 enemies that you gotta hit, 2 that are melee and 2 that are ranged, and they do no damage basically to you. This section will last probably a good 30 seconds, maybe not even, to be honest, with how quickly people will clear this. Then, once you get into this boss fight, it is one of the cooler looking arenas and one of the more intimidating looking bosses, despite actually being one of the easiest ones. All it's gonna start with is he's gonna shoot out like a little black box at you every so often, or at somebody, and it's gonna do no damage. The first phase is going to be over in less than 5 seconds basically. After that, he's going to fly up in the air and target one person. If you're not the person being targeted, this does 0 things for you. You're basically going to see as everybody's running around and still just shooting the boss. If you are targeted, just simply run away. It's not going to do too much damage if you get hit by 1 or 2 of the boxes either. It does very little damage, to be honest, unless you take every single shot. So, anyways, people are going to keep damaging him, and at this point, he's going to switch to doing a few different phases. He'll either do the previous phase, or 2 new phases. One, he makes a purple tornado in the middle of the room that will push you back if you're near the middle, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Then, the tornado will start firing purple shots off at you, and it's not anything too crazy to dodge, especially if you're in third person. If you do get hit, it's probably not going to be for much damage, and you'll probably heal up like most of it by the time you'll get hit again. Now, the other phase he can do is the scariest phase in the entire boss fight. This is called the black hole. Despite this being one of the easiest dungeons of the game, this boss has a one-shot mechanic. But if you have enough speed and you run away from this thing, it's very, very easily avoidable, and if you start getting caught in it, you can just Nexus in plenty of time. You have a ton of time, actually. The problem is, most people have no idea this one-shots you, so there's tons and tons of deaths to it each day. So if you ever notice yourself start getting sucked into the black hole, immediately Nexus. Other than that, as long as you avoid the thing, there's nothing to really worry about. Just run for your life if you see it coming towards you. Then he'll do his final new phase once you've damaged him down enough. This phase will have a bunch of red circles that start appearing all on the ground. You really, really want to play in third person for this so that you can see all around you. Now, for the most part, you're not going to get too damaged in this phase, but if a bunch of the red circles start stacking up on top of each other, you can really take a lot of damage fast. So don't underestimate it. There are people who die to this phase, but other than that, this entire boss fight is a relatively simple boss fight that you hardly see anybody die to unless it's the black hole because they don't know the Nexus. Anyways, once you kill this boss, it can either drop white bags, it can drop a black bag, which is worth a ton, or it can drop blue bags, which drop tier 8 items in them. Also, you'll notice that you can get crit potions from this. Unlike the center dungeons where you can only get speed, attack, def, and vit, you can get crit chance from here. So, doing this, you can start working on maxing another stat. Alright, now that we're done with the first 40 tier point dungeon, let's move up in the world and let's go ahead and do the easiest 45 tier point dungeon. So to start getting into this dungeon, you either probably have a white bag that's giving you 11 tier points or 12 if you've exalted the white bag, or you've upgraded to tier 8 gear from the event bosses you've been doing or the event dungeons you've been doing. Anyways, you'll be going to the Yoooo for this. This is by far the simplest event boss in the game. There's basically no way you possibly die to this thing. It's literally just a giant slime that shoots out some shots and there's some minions that you gotta clear. There's really nothing for me to talk about, but there is the final phase where it starts chasing people down. Now, if you have really low gear or very low survivability stats, you might actually start to get messed up if he chases you down multiple times and hits you. Other than that, this event boss is basically pathetic. Alrighty, let's go ahead and make our way into the Chronos dungeon now. So, this dungeon is going to be a very relatively easy dungeon. There's going to be some enemies that you gotta clear out. Now, they can really mess you up a little bit if you're not careful. You see these little mage slimes? Look what they do to you. They slow you and they make your screen zoom in, and it absolutely makes your life a living hell. And then on top of that, they do a good amount of damage, actually. So just kind of take the clearing slow, and you'll be definitely fine in this part. Anyways, as a group, you'll probably want to be going through the dungeon and splitting up and going down different pathways so that you can kill each of these little mini-bosses that actually unlock the boss fight. Then we get into the actual boss now. So this boss is only going to have 2 really rough phases, but once you learn them, you shouldn't be taking damage in them basically at all. So anyways, the first phase is going to be extremely easy. It's going to last probably only like 10 seconds to be honest. But he's going to be swinging around his sword and attacking people. It's not going to do a huge amount of damage, so you don't have to worry too much, but play safe if you want and be far away from him. He does have a slime attack that will show blue particles though whenever it's going to hit, and do not be wherever that is because that will kill you now on the other hand. So once that phase is over, all of a sudden you're going to see you feel heavier on your screen, and that's going to be pretty damn intimidating the first time. Next, you're going to see that there is going to be a bunch of green lasers that are going around the room at this time. Basically, what they do is every couple seconds they will turn black and damage you if you're near them. Now, this looks terrifying. You see me on my knight up there pushed in, taking a bunch of damage and stuff. But if you're a ranged class, you can see how I push back way back into the lane, and you don't take any damage if you're back there. You can just chill, and there's so much space that you shouldn't be getting hit by the lasers at all. So if you're a little scared of this phase and just want to leech for the first time, feel free, or just do it every single time. I don't think anybody's going to really care. Just go back to the back and just, you know, sit back there and don't take any damage. So once this phase is over, he's going to shoot this big circular shot at somebody. Now this thing do not actually take for granted. If it hits you, it won't do too much damage, but you'll see that there's a bunch of these weird black particles that start coming out of wherever it is. I'm pretty ashamed to say, but I had the rank number 2 hardcore in this game, and this is what I died to out of all things. You know how I said this is one of the easiest event bosses in the entire game? Yeah, well if you walk over this thing, it just insta-kills you. I've literally only ever seen myself die to this. Somebody in my chat told me one other person did, but I don't believe him. I don't think anybody else ever would walk over those black shots. Other than that, he's going to go back to what he was doing at the beginning, doing some sword slams, doing some sword slashes, just kind of stay back, and you're not going to take much damage as long as you don't get sword slammed on. So once this phase finally ends, he's going to go to the middle of the arena, and all of a sudden you're going to see these weird pillar shots that start shooting out. They'll shoot forward a time and kind of alternate directions in which they shoot. These things are pretty relatively harmless. They'll hit you for a little bit of damage, but you shouldn't be getting hit by them much at all. Now, the big thing that's going to happen in this phase is, do you see the black plus that's made out of blocks in the middle of the room? It's going to turn into a clock dial and point to a direction he's going to teleport. Now, this terrifies people a lot. Once he teleports, you're going to see there is a ton of shots that come out, but it's way less intimidating than you think. Basically, he shoots shots in a V or diagonal shape, and if you're just standing far enough away, you're never going to be hit by them because they don't move, they don't alternate, it's always just a V shape. So you can stay absolutely light years away in this phase if you would like to. Just basically keep watch for where he's going to teleport to. He's just going to teleport to one of 4 directions, and if you're not close to those 4 directions, then you're just fine. Even if you are, just stand in a diagonal, don't panic, and you're good to go, and this boss fight will be over in no time. Then hopefully you either get a blue bag or a cyan bag, so you start getting tier 8 and tier 9 equipment from this boss, and that'll be it. This boss also once again drops crit. Anyways, now that you've done both a 40 tier point dungeon and a 45 tier point dungeon, and have probably started to do these a little bit regularly, got some tier 8 and tier 9 gear, we're going to switch over to something else for a minute. Also, before I forget, just so you know, like, whereas most 40 tier point dungeons are about the same difficulty, 45 tier point dungeons are not built the same. Both Freddy and Anubis are significantly harder than Kronos as a 45 tier point dungeon, with Anubis being way harder. It's probably along the difficulty level of a 52 tier point dungeon. Probably the hardest 52 tier point dungeon, to be honest. So anyways, after doing these, you should be finished with all the quests besides a single one for the tutorial quest line now. And that's to complete Onyx's castle. Now, thankfully, you don't have to defeat Onyx itself, which is a 60 tier point boss fight, being the basically end boss of the game. There is harder content than him, but basically think of him as the end boss because you can defeat all the event bosses in the realm that work underneath him, and then his castle opens up and you go to defeat him. So this is going to be a bit harder than Kronos, so be a little bit prepared for this. It is around the 45 tier point dungeon difficulty though. Anyways, basically when all the event bosses in the realm die, you'll see a message pop up in chat talking about Onyx's castle being opening in 60 seconds. Once you see that, you need to make your way to the center, and then you climb the big staircase at the center to see where the portal will spawn. Or somebody can call Onyx in chat and you can just /TP to their name. Anyways, the most dangerous part of this is actually the castle clear itself. And it's not really because of the enemies or anything, it's because of traps that are actually in this place. You'll see lots of orange circles all around the ground, you'll see enemies all around, but the biggest thing you have to watch out for is these little turrets that are hard to see. If you're watching closely, there'll be these little sticks that have like an Onyx head on them that kind of spin around and do these black shots all around in a circle. They don't really stand out well at all, I'm not gonna lie to you, and if you stand on top of that tower, it actually just straight up kills you. I've had a lot of friends who are now too afraid to finish the quest line because they got killed by the turret and they just are too scared to even do the entire thing at all now. Anyways, I promise, as long as you keep your eye out on that, you take this slow, you wait for other people to clear, and you just make your way through the castle, you'll be just fine. So what people are supposed to do is they're supposed to go around and destroy a bunch of statues that are all around the place to open up different gates to open up the rest of the castle. Your first time being in here, you don't really have to worry about this. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be rushing around, they know what they're doing, they're going to be running at like light speed, destroying these things most likely. Basically at this point, want to take some time and slowly clear the enemies out and make your way through the front gates of the castle. Inside, eventually you'll see a staircase, you'll make your way up through there, and once all the statues are destroyed, there will be a gate that lifts. You'll just keep following the group, you'll keep doing this, you'll go forward some more, and then you'll see at some point when you get out of that gate and go into another area, there's people that are going to be jumping really high. Basically, there's this yellow glowing block, and if you jump on it, you just go get sent flying in the air. Now, there's going to be an enemy called a brute up here. This is the scariest thing of all. Kind of just leech it. Just straight up leech it. If you see people doing this thing, just wait in the corner and wait for this thing to die, because it will destroy you if you don't know what you're doing. You got both some red homing block attacks that will do a decent chunk of damage to you if a lot of them hit you in a row. And it's got a flame breath attack that absolutely demolishes you if you're standing in it. Anyways, if you're playing a little bit safe, you're kind of just staying at the back of the group and trying not to get hit too much by this fight will be over in no time, or you can just wait for other people to kill it. Anyways, once the thing's dead, you'll see a bunch of purple particles, and if you go inside, you'll get to the actual boss fights here, which are Orion and Osiris. This is where the real challenge is going to begin, but if you play this very safe, you should be fine for the most part. These guys are going to have 4 phases, basically, that they will randomly alternate between. As you can see, the first phase we get in this fight is a phase where they kind of spin around in the circle in the middle of the room. This is probably one of the easiest phases, if not the easiest, to be honest. You kind of just get in some shots when you can during this, or just kind of stay back if you have a lot of range, or just kind of don't even hit them at all. To finish this quest, you just need to make it through this alive. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about top DPSing or anything like that. If anything, it helps the other players because the more damage they do, the higher their loot is. Anyways, the next phase it's going to do is it's going to shoot a bunch of these black shots in a radial pattern and then have some like kind of curved shots that are going through them as well. Not sure how much better to explain it than that. You can see on the video for yourself basically what it does, but if you just stay back and you kind of try to dodge as much as you can, you're probably going to get hit by some things. You'll be fine. Basically, the further back you are, the higher chance you have of being able to dodge as the shots spread out a lot more. Oh, also big thing you can do with these shots is you can actually jump over them. I wouldn't regularly try to do this constantly, but if you see some shots coming at you you can't avoid, jump over them. The next new phase we're going to see in this is the butt slide phase. I can't believe I'm saying that that's a phase. But basically, they're going to start at one of the ends of the red carpet and slide on down. So whatever you do, do not stand on the red carpet at all during this. You want to be standing on the gray area at all times, because if you start where they start, you're dead. You're just gone. This is the phase that probably has the most potential to murder you. Other than that, it's these white boomerang looking kind of shots that are going to be coming towards you, and you kind of just avoid them as normal. You're probably going to take a shot or two, but you should be fine other than that. So unfortunately, in the footage that I got, they didn't, before killing one of the bosses, end up doing a phase where they chase after people. But basically what that phase does is they'll teleport every so often towards a player and you just run away from them. If you see this phase, you normally have plenty of time to back up, and it's normally one of the easier phases that you're not going to have to worry quite too much about, especially if your class has a lot of speed. But other than that, once you kill one of these guys, they're going to go into a stronger form now. You'll see now that all the projectiles change color at this point. They are faster moving and they do more damage. You can also see now that we've changed into his stronger variant that he's actually started doing the one attack that we didn't get when there was two of them. It's much scarier, honestly, when there's two of them than one. But you see how this guy's being chased into a corner? That is definitely not what you want to be doing. If you get chased into a corner during this, that's going to be a little bit scary. So kind of stay where you can kind of like not get pushed into a corner and have much more space to be able to move around. Other than that, it's going to be the same phases all over again that he's going to randomly alternate between, and it's just going to do some more damage, so just be wary of that. I think the phase that becomes the most difficult is the ones where it was the ones that you could jump over earlier, that are the shots that are different than the rest of the different attacks. Once those shots become white, they start doing a lot more damage, and it becomes a little sketchy at that point, so try to leech as much as you possibly can for this. Other than that, the boss should be finished once you get done with all these phases, and that's all there is to it. And at this point, you should have finished your quest line, which is very big. First off, you'll get 3 forge fragments, which are huge in this. If you've gotten a white bag at this point, and it's one that you're using and you want to upgrade, you can use 5 of these things, and you can upgrade it to an exalted variant. The exalted variants can vary a lot in what they actually do for the item, but it normally makes them much stronger, increasing their stats, their damage, things like that. So, to do so, when you go to the Nexus, you can go over to the left road, go past the loot boxes, and then you can see that there are these microscope-looking things, and you can go upgrade your item there. To get 2 more fragments, all you have to do is either break down white bags you don't want, or anytime you get a white bag that is from anywhere that is not a center dungeon, you will get fragments automatically along with the white bag when you get it. Other than upgrading your white bag items, the other big thing you unlock now is weekly quests. Now, these things are absolutely, truly massive. You will get 4 randomly generated weekly quests that go on a specific pattern of what you have to do each week. So first quest will be 5 lowlands dungeons, then 10 center dungeons, then 15 event bosses, and then 20 event dungeons. And it will be completely random for each player what different dungeons you actually need to complete or what different event bosses you need to complete for these 4 weekly quests. But the biggest thing is the rewards. You'll get tons of keys from each of these different quests you do, along with items like backpacks or rune removers or all kinds of different things like that are very, very big for you. Then the final reward each week is a random white bag from any single dungeon of the game. So you could get an item that's worth 30k, you could get an item that's worth 300k. It's very big, and you should do weekly quests every single week. Now, we only have one last thing left for this video, and that's going to be the 52 tier point dungeons. These dungeons mark the end of the mid game. Once you get past this and you start getting to the 60 tier point content, that is where the end game starts. We'll be doing one final video on that in the far future, because the length of that video is going to be much, much longer, because those dungeons are very difficult compared to the rest of these in the game. Like, not even comparable in difficulty. Probably for shatters alone, if I made a guide for that thing would probably be 45 minutes, an hour long, maybe even more. Who knows? That dungeon alone is crazy. Let's circle back to the 52 tier point dungeons. So all 3 of these are going to be much more difficult than any other dungeons you've done so far in this game. All 3 of them are much, much, much more difficult. Unless, of course, you've done Anubis Layer, because for some reason, for a 45 tier point dungeon, that thing can absolutely destroy you. So there's no real easiest one for this. I'm not going to lie to you. I will say that Colt is probably the most difficult of the 52 tier points. Loa is a little under that, and Void is a little under that. So we'll cover Void in this video, but it's probably going to be still much more difficult than just saying it's the easiest one, to be honest. There's no just place you can stand to completely avoid damage. There's no phases you could just completely opt out of or anything like that. You kind of have to be in here and know what you're doing. Anyways, this boss will start by you killing Chungus out of the realm, and that is the boss that will drop the Void. So let's go ahead and enter and see what we see. First thing, you'll see that this arena is actually a really cool arena. You can see a lot of places underneath you that you can't actually go to with it being clear floors. But the big thing you'll notice right away is a big giant flaming bird that you have to fight. This boss is going to have no set phases. It's going to do a bunch of random ones in random orders, unlike some of the other bosses that we've been doing. The very first phase is going to be the easiest phase that he has of all, but if you're not a range class, it's actually the most annoying because you can barely hit him during it. Basically, he's going to fly up in the air and make 4 little white shots that kind of come forward and do a little bit of damage if you get hit by them, but if you're ranged, you're probably never going to get hit by those shots. He also does some area damage around himself, but if you're ranged, once again, that does nothing to you, so this is just a free damage phase for any ranged class. The next phase we're going to see is jump phase, which is also the second easiest phase. Now, this looks extraordinarily intimidating as he jumps towards you, but he normally doesn't do too large of jumps. Every now and then he does, but he takes so long to land, you have plenty of time to not get set on by him. Also, if you're the one being targeted, what you'll notice is the shots don't go towards you, so what you want to be noticing is who's getting targeted and stand with them fighting the boss. Or, if you stand directly behind him, that's also where shots don't hit you, so you either stand in front of him with the guy being chased, or you stand behind him. Either or, if you're ranged, you're probably doing this phase just fine. Now, for 1 second, we're going to stop talking about the phases, because you're going to probably start noticing there's something that's going to be happening around the room that's not just the boss fight. And it's actually the hardest part of this fight, and that's that there's 4 little birds that will spawn in each corner of the room every so often. And they aggro to the nearest person, so if you're very far away from the boss, you're probably going to aggro actually a couple of these things onto yourself. And they actually do more damage than the boss, which is the crazy part. So if you get 2 of them stacking you out, you can really die pretty quickly. So you probably want to run over to the group and have them help you if you notice that a lot of the little birds are going after you, but you really need to be mindful of them. They kind of strafe straight forward whenever they see you, so if you sidestep whenever they're going to attack you, you can dodge them. Now, there's 2 more phases that we haven't seen yet, but they didn't happen at the beginning of this boss fight, so we unfortunately won't see them until after he goes into his voided phase. Basically, once you get him down to half health, the entire arena, including himself, is going to turn purple. All of his attacks at this point will do much more damage, so you gotta be very careful at this point. Even the little birds that spawn start being purple at this point too. And the other thing you'll notice is that all those red tiles that have been just kind of sitting on the floor are now purple, and they deal damage to you if you walk over them. Now, if you see the dark purple tiles, they don't actually deal damage to you, so you can walk over those, but there's 2 things to avoid this. You can either jump over the tiles if you need to, or you can crouch over them and they don't do damage as well. Anyways, at 1/3 of his health, he finally decides to do a new phase, so what he's going to do here is he's going to fly up in the air, belly flop down, and there's going to be a bunch of shots that shoot out. Now, don't panic and go crazy and go left, right, and hit every single shot in this, or you're going to die pretty quickly. You'll pretty quickly notice in this that you can find a sweet spot where you don't get hit by probably but maybe 1 shot, because most of the shots are going to shoot in the exact same direction. And finally, we have his last attack, which can be very, very deadly if you're not prepared for it. And you'll see this attack is so deadly that it even tells you words on the screen that you're the target. Basically, what it's going to be doing is, as you can see, it's going to be shooting fire at you. So, to avoid this attack, all you do is move completely away from it. As long as you keep moving, you won't get hit. So, it may look incredibly intimidating, but it is nowhere near as intimidating as you'd actually think it to be. Other than that, that's the only other phase. So, once you finish this boss, this is where you get tier 10 gear, which is your final tier upgrade before you finally hit the end game. Also, this dungeon drops the most important potion of all, which is health. The higher your health is, the higher your chance of not dying. There's a lot of different attacks in this game that are called something called insta-pop, and if you don't have enough HP, you just straight up die. So the higher you can raise your max HP, the higher chance you have of surviving one of these insta-pop attacks. Anyways, hopefully this guide got you into the mid-game, got you to do a lot of different event dungeons, got you get into weekly questing and finish your tutorial quest, and I hope this video helped out a lot of people. If anybody has any suggestions of other videos for me to make sure to leave them in the comments. And other than that, I stream 10+ hours a day every single day at twitch.tv/cebmofroz. So if you want to stop in and say hi, have fun, hang out, do dungeons with me, you can hop on into the stream anytime. Also, we play exclusively in the Realm Twilight, so you can see me there every single day. Alright boys, it's been Seb, see you guys later.